Welcome to the House of the Hounds. We're the Lorehounds, your guides through the dance of the dragons. I'm John.
And I'm David, and this is our feedback episode for the season finale of HBO's Game of Thrones. What am I talking about? House of the Dragon, Season 2, The Queen That Ever Was.
Well, it had some Game of Thrones in it.
It
so
did.
I think you're fair to say that. So this is our feedback episode, which, you could still send stuff to us if you want. We're not going to read it. Well, no, we'll read it, but we won't. We read it on air. HOTD@thelorehounds.com, where you will find someone on the other line. Who is it, David?
Nancy M, 2 kids, 2 dogs. And guess who is here with us this evening? Nancy, how are you doing?
I am doing very well. I'm very nervous to be on the air with 2 people who I have listened to nonstop now for 2 years. And I am so thrilled. I can't even tell you.
That's great. Well, we couldn't wrap up the season without having you on at least for a few minutes just to say hi to everyone and just for us to give a chance to say thank you for all that you did. As you know, when a big show is really ticking over, the feedback can get quite a lot. And
yes.
Given
especially if I get so many things wrong like I did.
Exactly.
You're always adding you. Yeah.
Or I call Joel a monster. That we had to break our feedback episode into 2 for that one. So being able to drop in, because both John and I have day jobs and families and all that kind of stuff, and so then and to do multiple podcasts in a week and then be able to drop in, have a well-organized, well-formatted document that we can read, to know that people who took the time to write in actually got a response from us. Because I know in other podcasts, you send an email and you don't know what's going on.
It was nowhere, yeah.
Yeah, so it just made such a huge difference for the community. And so we really just wanted to have you on for a quick moment to say thank you and just tell you how much your efforts meant to us, to John and I specifically. And I think you've been having a lot of fun with everybody as well.
I've been having so much fun. It should be illegal. I swear to God. As I've said, I've listened to you since you first started podcasting 2 years ago in the run up to Rings of Power, and listening to all that you do. And not just from a podcasting perspective, but the value added that you provide our community with what started off as the Detective's Notebook, and that just exploded into the one that rules them all, that's coming out with the Rings of Power. And just everything that you do, you're constantly on Discord and communicating with the community. I'm thinking, how the hell do these guys fit 40 hours into 24? Because it's just not feasible. They have jobs, they have families. And that's why I wrote the first time and said, I'm retired. I have some communication skills. And if there's anything that I could do to save you 5 minutes a day, let me know. Because I'm not technical. I wouldn't really be able to help on, the technical stuff that some folks do on the Discord, but I do have communication skills. I wrote communications for politicians in the Ontario government for over 30 years. And so I know how to format a document in terms of organizing information. So that's why I first came up with the idea of having themes, because so many podcasts, the hosts are just pinging and ponging everywhere. And I thought, well, if we had some themes and the feedback that people were giving fit together, it would be better received and also better to understand. And also that I thought that in terms of how these documents are even formatted, where you place punctuation, where you hit return and start a new paragraph, so that as you are visually reading a document, I'm forcing you to take a breath. I'm forcing you to emphasize one line because I've pulled it out. So these are just some skills.
John, she really is the hand of the pod.
I was just thinking that, I think Nancy has learned to pull the levers of power here.
Yes. Yes. And it took a while to land on that name, but I love it.
We figured it out.
Love it. And I think
there.
that it's good because you're not going to be able to get rid of me unless you physically force me off the show. So whatever you need help with, I can be hand to the pod for Rings of Power. I can be hand to the pod for Kaleidoscope if you need me to.
Well, I won't be here for Kaleidoscope season 2 if that happens.
I doubt very much that's going to happen. But whatever you need help with, I'm here for it. And can I just make one comment about the show? One comment about the show. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Were there problems with it? Yes. There were some pacing issues. There were some, maybe it should have been 10 episodes and not 8. But when you look at the acting, when you look at the cinematography, the visuals, the costumes, the sets, and for God's sakes, the dragons who were so real. Like, I challenge you to find another show on TV that felt that way. Mm-hmm. If there was a ping of disappointment, it was just that the feeling I had when the closing credits came on in season 1 of that shot of Rhaenyra's face when she found out, because like first you were looking to her from the back and then you see her face and just like all that emotion about my son has been killed, what happened, the war is starting, and you've just like your fingernails were just, crushing into the sofa. We missed that this year. But I can't fault the season. Who knows what the politics were in the background, but I'll be here season 3 formatting the document for the two of you. I can't wait. And that's all I have to say. Again, thank you for letting me be a volunteer. And thank you to the community because I've been having so much fun interacting with you. I'm retired. I live in the middle of nowhere because my husband wanted to move out near his family. So this brings me joy. That's all I can say. You guys bring me joy.
Thank you. And I think joy. I think when John and I got our start, we came out of a community.
Yes.
Right. And so that has always been part of our identity as a podcast is it was sort of from community for community because we wanted to educate community in prep of Rings of Power. And so having a great moderator team, having all of these affiliate podcasts and all of these different co-hosts. And, now, with you and of course, Brian is working on the blog. We haven't been talking on the blog very much, but we need to do that. And just the fact that we can empower our community and have people engage in this way, be it just regular feedback writers or regular email writers or what have you. Yeah. That I think that's really part of what we're the power of many as opposed to the power of one. If we're to use it.
You didn't sing it though.
No, sorry.
No. And that's why the Discord is really important. And I always make sure to comb Discord because there are people who
it gets so naughty in there. The hair just gets tangled up.
It does. But
I have an 8-year-old daughter, so we're always brushing hair. I edit
our feedbackers. So if they say he or she, I will drop in the name. Or if they're referring to something that's not obvious, as you know, I will put it in brackets.
Yeah.
So that because their comment is good, but maybe because it sounds like it's reporting or responding to something, I will sometimes edit the beginning so that it sounds like a standalone. Or oftentimes I will write the writers and say, you know what? Can I suggest this little edit? And they'll say, yes, please. Thank you. So,
and I think that's a really important thing too, because it takes time to it takes a little bit of energy from your day.
Yeah.
To sit down and to compose an email. And then if you're worried about punctuation or spelling, some people don't, whatever. Yeah. But that's a barrier that can get in the way of people having self-expression. And so if they know that, and then for you to do that, because there's times in the past where we'll be reading an email.
Yeah.
And then we'll be like, oh, wait, did they mean this? Is that a typo or what is that? And so like you said, your communication skills kick in and then you're like, okay, these guys are going to be reading it.
Yeah.
So how does it sound read versus how is it written in the moment?
Precisely. It's so important. It's so important because that's a trick that I learned writing for people who were reading.
Yeah.
whether in the provincial government or whatever.
Right.
But I don't want to take up any more of your time because I know that there are like 38 pages of feedback.
So what's next for the Hand of the Pod? I think we had talked about it, but do you want to tell people what you're going to be working on?
The Rings of Power.
Great.
And also, you've asked me to help with the
show guide.
The show guide.
Or not the show guide, sorry,
the tracker.
The tracker.
The tracker. Yeah, the show guide is doing very well. Doesn't need any more help from me. For the show tracker. And I am going to be asking everyone to help me because I'm 60. And so I'm not really hip on things. So I'm going to need help on where do I go looking for information to populate the coming attractions. Like where do you find out all this stuff?
Right.
Because I'm not really on Twitter or anything like that, but I'm willing to learn whatever you want me to learn.
Resources. I'm going to be teaching. Yeah, you and I are going to jump on and I'm going to run you through a bunch of stuff and we'll work out our flow.
Yeah,
that'll be a big help.
I had never used Google Docs. So I was freaking the first time. I think I sent it to you about 7 times. I'm like, how do I know that it actually got, like there was no message that sent,
Right. Yeah. I think there's like a way to see, but yeah, it's a little buried.
Yeah. So have a good evening. And hello to everyone out there. I really appreciate all the little messages you sent with your appreciation of what I'm doing. The Lorehounds community is very, very important to me, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. Thank you, John. Thank you, David. And thank you, Alicia, too.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nancy. I hope everyone sends Nancy love or we will find you.
Oh, trust me. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Well, David, what a lovely conversation with Nancy.
We are so lucky with this community that has coalesced around this project that we were like, hey, you want to do some podcasty thing? And like suddenly we have all these people having a great time and really getting to hang out with cool people and talk about cool stuff. So that makes me really happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Nancy did write a note and said, can we give a shout out to Swampy on her behalf, because there were 2 Nates last week, Swampy Nate and Japanese Historian Nate, that we, I guess, mixed up.
Oh, okay.
There are 2 Nates. We are sorry for conflating the Nates, but you know what? It's kind of on brand for this show. How many fucking Agons are there?
We have a Swampy Nate and a History Nate.
Exactly. Well, hello. Welcome to all Nates. Nates of all kind.
Nates are welcome.
So, David, this is the last pod you and I will do on this season. Correct. I'm going to be back with Alicia tomorrow to talk about book spoilers, but do you have any other parting thoughts on this season?
I think I have gotten to a place where I'm just sort of at peace with the way this season ended up. I've read a little and seen, people talking about a little bit this and there, and I haven't dug deep into this issue. And, listening to some other podcasts and stuff. And it just seems like it kind of got to be a mess there with HBO and the network and the parent company and the writer's strike and a whole bunch of circumstances that brought it to an 8-season conclusion where we have the armies on the march. And other information I've heard about the books and what was kind of originally planned was there was going to be quite a banger of an event or an activity, something that was going to happen, and that we had. I think we were all kind of expecting that to fall into this season, and it didn't. It fell out.
Right.
And you know what? Fine. I'm at peace with it. I don't have any. I don't feel like I need to give any emotion to the fact that this is well outside of my control. This is the season we got.
Right.
The actors were awesome. The production teams were awesome. The writing was awesome. The CGI was awesome. And I don't personally want to let my expectations of what the season, quote unquote, should have been according to me versus what we got. And I get that maybe this wasn't what they wanted, what they had originally wanted to do, the writers and the creators of the show. So I've really just come to a place of being at peace with this thing. So, And I think if anything, the frustration or the sadness we felt or anything like that, it's just really a marker of the fact that we had such a great time and we kind of care about this property, and we
want more,
really
right?
wanted more. We wanted more. So
yeah. I want the world. I want the whole world. Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going with it. I'm certainly not fan bankrupt. I think it's funny because when I was kind of pissed about the Ahsoka finale, like I really was like fired up. I was like, this is just a bad finale after,
right.
and I think it was because it was such a good season until the finale. We got some emails saying like, what, I totally disagree, this and that. I don't think we got a single email. Maybe I'm wrong because I haven't read them all because Nancy does it for us now. But I don't think we got a single email being like, you are dead wrong and it was an amazing season. I think we're all kind of like good, not great, and that's fine. Like that's good TV. Remember when TV used to be like 90% bad? Now it's like usually pretty good. And so I don't want to act like I'm fan bankrupt or I'm not coming back for season 3. Of course I am. I think we're going to have a really good season 3. And I'm excited to hear what people have to say before I talk to Alicia about what I'm excited for in season 3.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Would you like to do the prelude to this leftover voicemail from week 7?
Sure. I can do that from Vanessa. So we got a voicemail from Vanessa W. It kind of got lost in the churn because Nancy is so thorough. She has it transcribed in here. And so we're just going to read the voicemail rather than. So Vanessa, we hopefully we'll get you sorted out in the future and make sure that we get your voicemails into the show. Anyway, this one is from last week and says, "Hi guys, I just want to say hi. This is Vanessa from San Jose. Hey, Vanessa. And just to say how much I enjoy the podcast. It's one of the highlights of my week. I really enjoy listening to your commentary. I can't wait for Rings of Power to start, and I really appreciate the $10 monthly pass. It's kind of nice. I don't listen to every single show that's out there in the universe, so it's nice to be able just to pick up the ones I do want to listen to. So I really appreciate it. Great idea."
Oh, I just want to make clear, it's not a monthly pass. This is a one-time, forever, lifetime pass to that.
Right.
Yeah.
With the verbiage.
It's even better, Vanessa.
Even a better value. We're value-generating machines, as
sure
you
are.
said once. And that's great, Vanessa. That's really good feedback for us because this is exactly what the season pass was designed for. So, boom, on target. Thank you. And thank you to all the season pass holders. You guys were great this year, and we really appreciate you. It really made a difference for us for this year.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It emphasized that it was worth covering the show.
Exactly. So, and we're excited for Rings of Power as well. We've already got people signed up for that. So if you want to get on the Rings of Power season pass, where do they visit us at? Our website?
You can still go in the link tree in the show notes. Okay. That will, if you go to the Supercast page in the link tree, that has the Rings of Power season pass on it.
Perfect. Great. John, why don't you pick up Vanessa's email because she's got some deeper lore on the Hugh parentage question.
Sure. Just a quick comment about Hugh's parentage. You guys were saying there was no way he was Sarah's son. Yeah, so this is the whole correction that about 20 people wrote in to tell me, yes, it could have been Sarah. Yes. So here are the other clues, though. This is the substantive part from Vanessa. In the books, it talks about how she was the wild child. She went off and ended up creating a brothel of her own in Pentos or Essos. I can't remember which one. Well, Pentos is in Essos. It could be both. During the Great Council, when they were picking their new heir, she had sent 3 of her sons over, and one of the things they mentioned in the book was that one of her sons looked a lot like Jaehaerys did as a youth. Maybe it's one of the reasons that Vermithor picked him because he looked a lot like Jaehaerys and maybe even sounded like Jaehaerys. Maybe the dragons, because the blood magic is involved with them from Old Valyria, maybe they can scent that DNA line. So what?
M count.
Yeah. So he looks at Hugh. He sees Jaehaerys as a young man. He kind of responds to Hugh's authority and authoritative voice because maybe Jaehaerys kind of did the same thing with him. And then he can also smell that, hey, he's got Jaehaerys' DNA. Oh, okay, you're my writer. I just wanted to say thanks so much for all the work you guys do. Keep it up. Can't wait to see the next episode. Well, thanks. Thanks, Vanessa. And I really appreciate that context on Sarah. I couldn't remember exactly the details, which is why I hesitated to give them. last episode, but you are correct. This very well could be Sarah's son.
And interesting information about the, tying in with the writer connection and the magic and all of that kind of stuff. I was thinking about this today too. It was interesting when, what was the name of the Kingsguard that got Chris beat up? The guy.
Stefan Darklin.
Thank you, Stefan Darklin. Well, he establishes connection, right? The modem, goes through its ear thing, and they're like, ooh, and then he gets connected to the dragon, and he says, by God, I've done it, or whatever the thing is, and the dragon's like, no, you don't. But he still established a connection, right? He's still, the modem still, like, that the whole handshake.
Right.
You're young, you're old enough to you must have connected by modem, right?
Oh, sure did.
Yeah.
I heard that horrific sound.
So I think the handshake happened, and then for whatever reason, whether it was his arrogance or his hey, I'm mastering this dragon, and the dragon is like, you don't master me like that, and but it's interesting though that there is some sort of ethereal, some sort of something in the ether connection that gets established.
Right. Very nice. The next subject is pick up the pace, will you? You want to start with Chris M?
Sure. Chris wrote in an email. Hi, Nancy and the team. I've got a lot of little thoughts here regarding the finale. Feel free to merge with other feedback. And again, that's one thing that Nancy does is she chops up your emails if you get them. So we made it to the end of the season, says Chris. This was definitely a slow burner season, but I think some of the reactions might be a genre misunderstanding. I feel like fans seem to set on this being an action adventure in the vein of Game of Thrones because it's in the same universe. But since the first episode, it's pretty explicitly leaned into being a character drama. In line with that, the season ended with a big character climax for Alicent and Daemon rather than a big showpiece. I think that's also why they're not feeling beholden to the Game of Thrones pacing formula. That said, this episode had pacing issues, but for me, it was because we kept cutting to Rhaenyra's marathon every 3 scenes. And I'm sure we're going to hear more from Chris later on in the doc. John, do you have any thoughts about that, about the character drama versus the action?
Yeah, I think that the problem was, as I was saying in the last recap, the character drama kept being like a bullet point instead of a developed scene. And I didn't feel like we actually moved that far forward with characters in the finale. Mm-hmm. I heard this thing. I heard this and I was trying to think of it in the last recap, this framework that I don't remember where it's from. If someone wants to write in, let me know, please. Game changers versus cliffhangers, right? And I feel like we got set up with a lot of cliffhangers and not a single game changer. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could argue that Alicent offering to open the gates is a game changer, but I would say a game changer would be Rhaenyra actually taking the city. Mm-hmm. And I think that this episode didn't execute on that, unfortunately. Like, we didn't really change the state of the war that much. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's my critique. That's my critique. And again, I think I said this on the episode too. Like, a battle would have done it, but also a lot of character stuff would have done it too. It just needs to move in some way.
I wonder if it's not a question of placing certain things. If we had ended, and here I know we're engineering the show here, right? And some people, whatever. Anyway, but I'm going to engineer with the show because I can. What if we had taken the scene with Daemon rallying the troops kind of as the last dramatic tension moment, and then cut to like all the armies marching and that sort of, montage scene or something like that. For some reason, that scene got washed out by some other stuff for me. And maybe I'm misremembering all that went on. But really with character drama, right, you want tension and release. And I think I got the feels when Daemon took his knee.
Right. I did.
That was great. And then for some reason, by the time that the episode was over and then the season was over, those feels got dissipated somehow in the
when you're running a
mechanics of the
5K
plot.
with Reyna, it's really hard to keep up the feels.
It's true. It's true.
All right, let's go to Double T in Melbourne, Australia, who writes in with an email saying, "Good morrow. Good morrow.
Hey, Double T.
Overall, a good season, but I do have to echo the deluge of concerns about the pacing and particularly the anticlimactic finale. To me, the way this season was akin to season 2 of Game of Thrones, getting to episode 8, where Stannis' fleet ominously enters the Blackwater Bay. The pyromancers are getting all their wildfire ready, while adding shots of the Tyrell and Lannister armies marching towards King's Landing. Then the season ends. Kindly wait 2 years for the Battle of Blackwater Bay. Imagine how we'd feel about that season of Game of Thrones if that were the case." This is a fair criticism. This is kind of what we're all saying, right? To me, this season has set the stage really well for a great season ahead, where we finally get into the thick of the war. Problem is, I could cut and paste that sentence from the end of season 1. After last season, there's no way I'd believe that in season 2, as far as major battles of the dance, all we'd get is a 10-minute dragon and troop battle, as great as it was. Or that we'd only see the death of one major character over the whole season. On a more positive note, my anticipation for each episode of this season was very high, and it's still executed at a high level. After seeing 2 whole seasons, I'd place the show at the level of seasons 5 to 7 of Game of Thrones. Mostly good with some clear problems. Definitely not as good as seasons 1 through 4, but far better than season 8 of Game of Thrones. I would agree with that placement. It's right there in the middle. To me, that is still damn good TV. Yet everything we've seen from this franchise post season 4 of Game of Thrones just shows how hard it is to reach and maintain those lofty heights of quality. I'll also add that in the long term, when we're rewatching the series, the problem of punting the final 2 episodes essentially to next season won't matter. It will all flow seamlessly, and I suspect will make for a brilliant epic story. Who knows, as we get closer to season 3, we may even be grateful that we have so much epic action to begin the season with rather than having already seen it. Thanks for the great coverage, and see you in Middle-earth. This is a pretty good summary of all of that.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Double T. That was a well-reasoned argument, I think.
Yeah. I think that puts words very well to my feeling about the season, and I think you hit it right on the money with we're at good, not great level of Game of Thrones quality.
And that said, from the plot and the story, because also though, in terms of acting and visuals and production design, this is I would put this on those elements. I would put that above anything that Game of Thrones House of the Dragon has put out. This season visually and has been a sumptuous feast. It's been really sumptuous feast. It has been great.
Who put porridge in your breakfast today?
With a little maple syrup and some butter.
Who put muesli in your breakfast today?
Yeah, feeling strong.
All right. Give us some Karen.
Karen V says, "I came to the realization that my problem with the Daemon storyline is really a problem with the pacing of the season overall. They spent so much time on it, but so little time on other things of equal importance. I wish that they would have balanced things a bit better, but in the end, I'm glad that we had time with Daemon and his demons." Yeah, it was kind of a slow glide path, right? For, his huffing off and then just a little bit every episode. And it was really kind of his therapy, right? It was him coming off of working through his ego trip.
Right. I agree with that. And I do think it was an effective arc that just got stretched so thin. It's kind of like Bilbo says, right? It's like butter spread out on too much bread.
That's good. Yeah. Where if we hadn't seen him for a couple of episodes and then we concentrated it a little bit, applied a bit thicker butter to the bread, it might have eaten a little bit better.
Exactly. You want to do Abby too?
Sure.
Since Karen's was so short.
Our dear friend Abby says, "I feel like if you're saying anything at all critical about the episode itself, not here to be sure, you get lumped into the hater group that only wanted to watch battles and such. Can't be further from the reality. I'm fine with the episode taking time to flesh out characters, famously like episodes most people call fillers for this reason. My gripe isn't with not much happening, It is with too much happening, being yanked around too much, and only maybe one plot line we followed throughout the darn mystery tour getting resolution. I hear everyone making excuses that, the budget, the strikes. And that's not my or stroke the audience's problem, right? That's not our collective problem. They embarked on this project. They had to know it would cost a lot. They had a budget for an expensive, silly team versus green, team black versus green promo. The structure of the show, what they kept in and what they cut or moved to a different season, how it's edited so it doesn't give you the whiplash, that can't really be hand waved away with the above excuses. I did like the season. Doesn't mean I have to suspend all critical thinking or be labeled one way or another for expressing feelings. And now our wait begins. Are we all watchers on the wall now, John?
Yeah, I just want to. I think that, first of all, the general tenor of the discourse around this show, there are some real toxic places on Reddit. Like, sure. I have seen. Shocking. Yeah, I know. Oh my God, Reddit has a toxic community. But yeah, I've seen some conversations on Reddit that like treat this like the worst thing they've ever seen. Say it's like Game of Thrones season 8, and I think that's extreme. I also think it's extreme to say this show is perfect, and the show is operating at like an extremely high level. I do think there's room for nuanced conversation, and I'm proud that our Discord is a place where that generally happens.
Right, people can work that out in a very collegiate atmosphere.
Yeah. So I don't worry. I'm here. Who will speak for the lukewarm watchers? I will.
Fair enough.
I will. And then I'll get reviews on Apple Podcasts saying that I don't like TV. All right. I just wanted to say, Pause In actually wrote in and said something that was nice. Let's end on a nice note for this section. On Discord said, really enjoyed this finale, and I get the criticism of not having big action scenes. But as far as I recall, wasn't that the case in Game of Thrones as well? Penultimate episodes had big battles and actions. We saw some of that in House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 7 as well with the dragon stuff. I'm satisfied at the end. Daemon scenes were the weakest part for me, but I think it kind of paid off at the end with him swearing his loyalty to Rhaenyra. It would have been abrupt if he had just done that after 1 or 2 episodes. Rhaena scenes were a bit of a waste, though. I love that's like the universal, like everyone's like, why did they do this? And isn't she being highly irresponsible, leaving Rhaenyra's younger children alone?
Yeah.
I guess it will pay off in season 3. So yeah, I think once season 3 comes and we see all the great action, people will soften their criticism of season 2, which had a great setup finale.
It does. A lot of cool stuff to look forward to. I have a slight defense of Rhaena.
Mm-hmm.
She's a teenager. Her frontal lobes aren't fully developed. Her brain isn't fully cooked. And I can remember many times being a teenager, going off and doing something that I thought was going to make a difference, or something that I really wanted, or trying to correct the scales as I saw them, that balance the scales or what have you. But I was, I didn't. You don't have your brain isn't cooked. You don't have some wisdom and some life experience, and that's how you get the life experiences, by going out and making these mistakes. Now, jeopardizing the entire lineage of the ruling family of the kingdom. Yeah. Well, maybe we could come in for a little criticism for there. And again, this is not anything to do about the setup of the plotting of it. Just what is a teenager doing out running around? That's a really teenager thing to do, right? To not think about the secondary consequences of your actions, but to lock in on one particular thing and think, wow, if I can just grab this brass ring, the world will be right. I will have achieved the thing that I wanted to, and it'll be cool.
Well, I was a millennial teenager, so when I was a teen, we were ruining Applebee's and napkins. We were killing those industries.
Okay.
Buying avocado toast, all those things that the boomers like to yell about. Right. All right, let's go to the season finale, or episode 8 of 10. You want to start with Susan?
Sure. Hi, Lorehounds. I appreciate your initial take for the season 2 finale and agree that it missed the mark a bit. Well, there were some good moments. The show didn't read as as a finale. Lots of setup and no real resolution for most of the plot lines. Frustrating that we have to wait 2 more years for the war to really begin. One small observation in the final montage. Did you notice that the Northern Greybeards were traveling on foot?
Mm-hmm.
That struck me as odd. As
have you seen the Northman?
as all of the other armies were on horseback, and the Northerners had the longest distances to travel to get to the Riverlands. Love the podcast. Thanks for the great content. Susan in Vermont. Hey, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
My fellow Vermonter. I think if we were to talk to a medievalist, they would probably validate this a little bit with the fact that horses and keeping a large amount of horses is a huge logistical thing in terms of grazing and care and feeding, and keeping a big stable of horses in the north versus in a temperate zone where you've got grasslands and all of that. I think there's something that goes along there. And then as well, with the majority of the armies of a medieval, medieval time period, the vast majority of the soldiery would be on foot, and it is cavalry units, which would be lords and highborns and knights and stuff like that, which is a very small percentage, and then cavalry units, which are maybe a double-digit percentage, but still very low versus the vast bulk. So I think what we saw was in those marching armies was just the very front of the army where the cavalry and the lords were at, as opposed to the entire army of horses.
Right. Yeah, I mean, just looking at the north, the whole reason that Cregan Stark sent the Greybeards is he's like, well, winter's coming and we need all the people here we can, right? And so I'm thinking he probably needs all the horses he can too, right?
As
and
well,
probably
exactly.
needs all the food he can for the horses. And so I could definitely see him being like, look, I'll give you straight up Greybeards. I never promised horses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it tracks. All around, both strategically as well as historically.
Doesn't make it suck less for them.
They're Greybeards. They're tough.
All right, Vanessa. Very sorry, but we cannot find your voicemail.
So let's actually just make a PSA here, public service announcement. When, by all means, communicating and stuff like that. But for us to get the voicemails, they have to come to the Hot D address. So make sure you send those to us, so that way we don't have any technical misses on where the voicemails go.
Right. But Nancy transcribed your voicemail because she is an angel.
She's awesome like that.
Yep. All right. So this is what Vanessa had to say. Hi guys, this is Vanessa from San Jose. I just wanted to share some thoughts about the season 2 finale. Just the season in general and how the show's going. I'm going to try to make this quick. I've recorded this 5 times already because I'm trying to get this under 2 minutes. Well, don't worry, because now it's going to be whatever pace I read at.
But hopefully you'll be able to send in voicemails for Rings of Power and we'll get all that worked out.
Yeah. Sorry, Vanessa. All right. So first off, totally agree with you on pacing. That could have been far better this season. I think the pacing of the first 2 seasons and the fact that there's such a gap between the seasons really affects viewership. I love the universe. I'm a Game of Thrones fan. I'm going to watch these shows no matter what, even when there's 2 years between seasons. But I really think it impacts the viewership. I really think if they'd ended with 10 episodes this season, I think it would have been much better. This really did not feel like a season finale. I don't want to get into the book spoilers, but given the twists that are involved with it in the books, I think it would have been a much more natural stopping place to end it with blank. I'm just going to redact that a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially with the things they established in this episode, with the conversation between Alicent and Rhaenyra, and Alicent saying, I'm going to open up the gates. It'll be peaceful, less bloodshed. Think blank would have been a better stopping point, but they didn't go there. Why? Because they're stupid. All right. Well, Vanessa, okay. now, settle down.
Dracarys.
Yeah, really. Vanessa's coming in to just Ryan Condal, beware. And speaking of stupid, if I had to see Rhaena, wide-eyed, mud on her face, desperate for water, freezing in the cold, that so turned me off in this episode. All I can think of, if she finds Sheep Stealer And if dragons can truly size up their potential riders, all I think of is he takes one look at her and goes, girl, if you're going to be going out on a dragon hunt, maybe pack a lunch, bring some water, possibly a blanket. As it is, you're too stupid to live, let alone be my rider. So I'm just going to torch you. It'll be a mercy killing. Anyway, have a great week. You guys love the show, love the season pass. Can't wait for Rings of Power.
Hilarious.
Vanessa, this made me laugh, and thank you for calling in. Sorry that we don't have your voicemail, but we'll make sure to get your voicemails in on Rings of Power,
which is LOTR at the Lorehounds.
That's right.
LOTR.
That's right.
The dragon rider, the sheep stealer, it was a foregone conclusion that she was going to find sheep stealer, right? Like they were setting it up. Oh, there's a mysterious dragon in the Vale. And, we see her running off. It's like, okay, she's going to find it. We get it. Did we need 3 or 4 scenes? Oh, whatever. But I do like the fact that they're both kind of hard done by, like sheep stealers just trying to be a sheep stealer, just trying to survive on the margins. And so is she. So they're kind of kindred spirits in that way in the immediate circumstances that they're discovering each other. So you're muted.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. David. All right. Want to go to Jean?
Sure. Our good friend and co-host Jean says this, as a standalone episode, this was effing dope. As a season finale, this wasn't very dope at all, in my opinion. The sort of cliffhanger that I don't want to see. Didn't expect to see and definitely wasn't expecting. Fair enough.
Well, my feet are already starting to kick the rocks. Thanks, Sean. How about Nate, too?
Sure. Every discussion I've read about has said that Condal's plan was 10, but to work within budget he was given, they had to move things and stretch it out. What I don't understand is that this is your flagship show that makes you billions. The only thing that can't turn fans away is if you half-ass it like season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones. So the last thing you should do is penny pinch. I'm not all that bothered by only getting one battle. For starters, what a battle it was. Second, we didn't get battles in Game of Thrones until season 5. Remember Tyrion being knocked out, so we completely missed the battle? Very good point, indeed.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to actually see the battle. All right, I'm going to take one issue with this. This is a literal show about a war between dragons, right? Like, I do think we need to see the battles to some extent.
We do.
Minor battles, sure. But there's a couple battles.
Like the Burning Mill thing was really a great device.
That's great. That's great.
Perfect. But going forward, we need battles.
Like, imagine if they were just like, yeah, Rook's Rest was crazy. Rhaenys died. And yeah, that would.
I wonder if they didn't show us the sharp point burning, because it would have been too much like the finale of Game of Thrones, where you have a blonde-haired dragon rider, torching the city. Maybe they, who knows? I don't know.
I think they just didn't want to pay for it, and I didn't need to see it. You know what I mean? Like, I that's fine. That's fine. I didn't need to see that. That told me everything I needed to know. Is that he went on a tantrum hunt.
Fair enough. Finishing up Nate's comment. Third, speaking as a military historian, battles are overrated. They're a fraction of what actually happens in warfare. Mm-hmm. I actually like that we're seeing armies have to take the time to travel and not just teleport across a continent. This is a really good point. I mean, there's so much in terms of logistics, setting up on the battlefield, intelligence, screening maneuvers. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on before an actual fight occurs. And so much of the back end and the front end is so important to what actually ends up happening in the battle and trying to control the circumstances before and after. So Nate makes a really good point there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think what I was missing was a game changer. Like, for example, at the end of Game of Thrones season 7, you have Daenerys sailing across the Narrow Sea. So we didn't need to see her first battle in Westeros, but we did get in that episode was Cersei sipped a lot of wine. No, it was Cersei getting rid of a lot of her domestic enemies, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a big game changer. So you do need something to alter the political landscape, I think, in a show like this.
And I guess it was Daemon bending the knee that really, with his army, I think that really was supposed to be that. And for somehow it didn't translate that.
I think because we start the season with him loyal and we end the season with him loyal.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't feel like we moved, even if perhaps the forces grew a little bit.
Fair enough. Yeah, because all season long they were playing up the Damon, will he, won't he, will we get, that's the only army we have. We do not have ground forces other than some graybeards that have a really long way to march. And some Vale, and the Vale is
maybe the Vale
is always finicky about committing their forces, right?
Yeah.
So, and those are two smaller forces. You really need that Riverlands host to be able to affect anything on the continent.
Yeah, Jane Aaron is busy staring out the fucking moon door, so you don't know what she's going to do.
All right. Should we move on?
Marilyn, our favorite Tolkien scholar, says, "Hello, Lorehounds. Thanks, Nancy, for all your hard work hurting feedback, kittens." Yes, thank you, Nancy. It sounds as though the final episodes were rather fumbled. I hope that whatever the sticking points were will be smoothed out. And I offer my sympathies to those of you who will find it difficult to wait 2 years for the next season, rather. All the best, Marilyn. Well, thanks, Marilyn.
Thanks for writing in all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, for not watching the show and writing inconsistently.
Exactly. It's been fun to get your takes since you're not really watching the show. Awesome. You want to take Cyrus? Close out this section?
All right. Cyrus closes out and he says, I understand people's concerns about what could have been with the 10 episodes, but I do think I prefer it this way. All right. So a yay-sayer. 1, we get more episodes for the characters to breathe between events, else it might feel like season 8 of Game of Thrones. Every episode is some crazy event. And a lot of the episodes of this season were ended on crazy events, right? They always bookended, not bookended, but they always landed the episode with like, wow, that was wild. Second, Gurm can write whatever he feels like, but bringing it to screen is hard work. Budget is a real concern. They could have cheaped out and given the dark episodes with CGI dragons, but they provided ones in full light. That's expensive. I would not have them cut that for cost reasons. I am bummed that Hot D is gone for 2 years, but I'm not unhappy with their decisions. Well, Cyrus, good friend of the pod, thank you so much for that positive note to end on this conversation of the whole season thing. I think that many things can be true, and I think you well established the other side of this conversation, which is that this is also true. They did a lot of hard work. They made a great looking season, and we're going to start off with a banger in season 3.
All I can say is, Zaslav, you better start saving up now, because now you've stocked up all of the big battles for 3 and 4. I don't want to hear like, oh, we had to push for the budget for season 4, because then it's not going to happen at all.
Right.
Like, I just think that you're going to need to figure this out, guys. All right. Debating Damon and Aemon character arcs. Karen sends in a voicemail. Here we go.
Hi, guys. So I wanted to make a couple comments on Aemon and Damon. I had to really think about that for a minute before saying those names. So I called in a couple weeks ago about how I had hopes that Aemon was going to show some softness, that he would not be this flat character. And it's really disappointing to me where we finished the season with him. He just is completely dark. He's gone full Joffrey Baratheon. And it's like the show is setting him up to be the big bad, which to me is crazy because people aren't the big bad in these shows. Society, the corruption of power, the effects of war, that's what these stories are really about. And just not putting any nuance into the development of Aemon seems really short-sighted to me, because I am so much less interested in him now than I was earlier. Conversely, all of that time that was spent with Damon that I complained about the entire time seems like it was time well spent, in that he has been a super important character all the way through the first 2 seasons. We've seen him struggle. We obviously have seen the way that his relationship with Rhaenyra impacts everything that's going on in the war. And I love that they put the nuance into his character that they did to bring along that storyline. The pacing is crazy, and I'll probably leave a different note about that. But it's strange to me that so much more time and effort and care was put into the Damon storyline than into the Aemond, because my understanding, and I have not read the books, is that it is actually the younger generation that becomes more important in this overall story of this war. So Aemond, I presume, is so important, but they have sort of left his character development off, especially the last couple episodes.
I'm going to say that both need to be very developed. Both of those characters. I don't think I would value Aemond over Damon as far as importance to this story.
This is a waffled comment.
Yeah, I can't say anything, but I'm just saying, like, they both need to be developed. But I agree with you that Aemond is underdeveloped now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think that's the problem.
He's a two-dimensional mustache twirling bad guy.
I would say one-dimensional, right?
Even one-dimensional. Yeah.
He's just evil. Like he's just straight up evil. And it's a shame that they set it up a little bit with the Luke stuff, with the sitting with what's her name?
Yeah, with the madam.
Yeah.
I don't know if we ever got her name. But yeah, because he says I regret it and the whole thing about the small folk, and then that completely just gets washed away.
Yeah, imagine we had a show guide that had the name of this madam.
I don't think she made it.
She did get named. I swear she got named.
Really? Okay.
Sylvie is the name. She's in the show guide.
Yeah. Named character. Okay, fair enough. Sylvie.
Yep.
So yeah. It's hard, right? It's hard. What are they? How to make these choices and to be efficient with character development. But yeah, they certainly got Aemond just straight down into a not a complex character.
And what's odd is that we spent a decent amount of time with him this season. He just acted so cruelly during those periods that I can't read him as anything else but a cartoonish villain.
Right.
Anyway, complaints. Let's move on to another voicemail from Michael, aka Dork of the Ninjas. Here we go.
I have not listened to your guys' hot take yet, but I wanted to get my thoughts on the episode. I want to speak in defense of the Damon plotline. This has a lot of the same type of feeling to me about what a lot of people said back in the day in Game of Thrones about the Theon plotline of him being tortured by Ramsay. That, this is just going on for too long. This is doing nothing but just meandering in the same plot points, so I don't need to keep seeing this. It has the same hallmarkers, but the thing is, though, at the end of that season, you believe where those characters are transformed their character to. I feel like we got a lot, like if it weren't for this plotline kind of meandering and kind of slowly getting to its point of what it was talking about, Damon wouldn't have been able to believably say, hey, I need to follow you. I don't think he would have been receptive to that message very early on. He had to be broken down, and that's what we saw happen over the season. I think it was well done, and I am very, very excited for the next season and looking forward to y'all's coverage. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks, Michael. I don't disagree in as much as we did need to see Damon's evolution, and he did need to go through the therapeutic process.
Yeah.
And it was just a question of how quickly are we moving to that, and how compressed is that, so that we kind of feel it. It's a very tricky accordion game. Too fast, and we don't believe it. Too slow, and we all kind of are going like, "Hey, when is this gonna, resolve?"
Yeah.
And so it was a tough one.
Yeah, I would say I'm glad that people like this. I think that it was important. I still won't forgive them for making me watch Game of Thrones season 8. I won't forgive it.
I really, just to rewrite the show for the writers, I would have done like maybe 3 flashes, and we would have gotten it. It would have been fine. So,
and we can rewrite it all we want because this is our podcast.
That's right.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we get back, we will go to Alicent. We'll be right back with more House of the Dragon. And we're back with more House of the Dragon. Next up, we've got another voicemail from Karen to talk about Alicent returning the visit. Here we go.
Hi again, this is Karen, aka Zero Ducks from Discord. Doing a rewatch just now, and I just noticed something that I think is so beautiful that I missed the first time around. As Alicent and Rhaenyra are having their conversation toward the end of the episode, Alicent seems like she's pretty much laid bare, and they've made their agreement. Alicent has agreed to give up Aegon and just asks to be allowed to leave with Helena and her granddaughter. She really quickly says to Rhaenyra, "Come with me." And it's almost like under her breath, but it made me think of their relationship in the beginning of season 1 and the depth of that friendship and the types of friendships that young women can have that are so intimate and so deep. It's not romantic necessarily. It's just this kinship that I think young women tend to have with one another, especially when they're young. But this little moment brought that all back, and it went by so quickly. I missed it the first time I watched, but I love that they threw that in there just to round out Alicent's character and to touch back on the importance of the relationship between these two women in the bigger story.
Yeah, that's a really great moment, and it was very subtle, and it went by really quick, and we all kind of dismissed it as like, oh, of course Rhaenyra can't, join you or whatever, but it really does touch on the relationship, like you said, and how important they were to each other at one point, and how at every turn and every twist, they just couldn't help but hurt each other. And those bruises were really deep because of the affection and the intimacy that they had for each other.
Yeah, it's the people closest to you who can hurt you, right?
Yeah, you're not expecting it. It's one thing if somebody's coming right at you and you're prepared for it and you're braced for it. But when you get that sharp elbow from a side that you're not expecting, and especially in a place that's vulnerable or you haven't shared with the world, and it can really hurt. I think there was a moment that really moved me was when Rhaenyra feels for Alicent when Alicent agrees, a son for a son to the whole son for a son equation, because she's also feeling the loss of her son, and she understands what that means for Alicent to do that. At the same time, Rhaenyra is wearing the crown, and she's not wrong in that for her legitimacy to be accepted, for her to have legitimacy in the realm, she has to put down this rebellion in the most brutal of ways.
Right. Yeah, again, I wasn't super sold on Rhaenyra asking her a son for a son emotionally. And then people pointed out, and I think rightly so, that politically she kind of has to put down the usurper to shore up her claim. I don't know. I think they could have laid the groundwork a little better, but I do appreciate that they called us back to the season 1 relationship because, I've said before, they really did. This is a show creation because Alicent is significantly older than Rhaenyra in the books, and she essentially acts as a more traditional stepmother to Rhaenyra.
Right.
This childhood friendship is something entirely in the show, and I think it's for the better.
I think when we give a defense of the show and the things that we've liked, I do like that this is the heart of this story on television is these two women and their history going back to their childhood. And if that's a show creation, bravo, right? Standing ovation to the writers and Condal and all that, whatever Germ is put into the stew. But that has been a really vital and well-developed part of this storyline. And when they first met, when Rhaenyra went to King's Landing, my heart was pounding. I was on the edge of my seat. The stakes were high. It was a really,
which is funny
really
because
great.
that was one of the most criticized scenes in the whole show.
That's
on
hilarious.
The internet, yeah,
it was amazing to me.
yeah.
It had me I was like worried for Darkland, who was waiting outside. He's going like, "Oh my God, this is nuts."
Right.
And then I love them showing back up, still wearing their robes, and everybody at small council's
Yeah.
like, "What the? Where the hell have you
Right.
been?"
Yeah, that was good comedy. I do want to say I don't know if we are currently at the point of over milking the relationship though, because I think this story may be done. This story between the two of them,
I don't disagree. Yeah.
May be kind of coming to a close, and I wonder if the show's rightful pride in what it created via the season 1 relationship and enjoying the chemistry between the two actors playing Alicent and Rhaenyra, I wonder if it will be a weakness if they have trouble letting go of that in favor of the story, right? We don't want to feel like the writers are pushing characters to be to the forefront of the story. We want to feel like the story is telling itself.
Fair enough. Yep, I agree. They've wound up this clockwork of these multiple armies all descending at the same time, and that spring tension is gonna release, and it's gonna get messy. The proverbial shit's gonna hit the fan, and how well will they be able to tell the story? Because we can't keep hearkening back to their childhood. They are women now, and they are responsible for how things have. They play a part in this larger war that's happening.
Yeah, and I think Jason Aemond are really underdeveloped now. And so are Bela and Rhaena, really. Like we just didn't really get to know the younger generation that much, and I think that's a weakness of the show.
Okay.
Anyway,
right.
Chris M says, or you want to read it?
Hard to disagree on the closing Alicent Rhaenyra scene, and I'll break down why. Oh. She's not Cersei, who will burn the realm to save her kids. Right? Yeah, and Cersei was like, my kids above all else, right? So she really was that. Continuing, she says as much in the first season, even if we don't believe her then. But if anything, her arc is trying to put what she thinks is right over the flesh and blood people in her life. Aegon is functionally dead in her mind, and she thinks that Aemond is a monster. Also, Alicent didn't want to give up Aegon at first. It's only when Rhaenyra demands it, and even then she almost broke down. With Rhaenyra's 7 dragons, Alicent is aware that they're all dead anyway. Helaena is the only decent child left in King's Landing, so she's trying to bargain for life for Helaena and herself because she knows that Rhaenyra doesn't want to light up cities if she doesn't have to. If anything, they took the Sophie's Choice element that was supposed to be blood and cheese and moved it here with more effect because we know these characters now, so it's more of a betrayal. Thoughts?
I'm going to disagree with the characterization of Rhaenyra trying to do what's right over, the flesh and blood. I think actually it flows much more with sort of the effects of patriarchy. Oh my God, I'm about to go into the whole thing. The effects of patriarchy on women in a patriarchal society. Here we go. I think Alicent, like many others, uses scripts provided by patriarchy to protect herself against loss, to protect herself against the feeling of loss. She fears losing her children, and therefore she is going to do what she needs to do to put the men in power who she thinks will protect them. She fears, being seen as promiscuous, so she is scandalized by Rhaenyra, and she does everything her father asks her to, and she's obedient as a wife, other than stabbing her daughter-in-law, stabbing her stepdaughter. I do think that this, you can chalk a lot of this up to the fear of losing her children. Now, maybe I think you could make the case that she sees Aegon as already dead, so I agree with you there. She sees Aegon as already lost, and Aemond she sees as a monster. So she says, okay, I fear losing Helaena. That's the last child that I want her to protect. And I think she could be acting out of that now. But I don't think she necessarily goes what's quote unquote right. I think she goes on what's the norm.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Doesn't she say as much to Rhaenyra in that scene?
Yeah, she says, I follow what these men said. I just did what I was told, basically.
And
not necessarily what was right.
And I internalized that and acted out on that.
Right. Little introspective from Alicent, honestly, but yeah. But so I basically I agree with some of what you say, Chris, and I disagree with some of the internal workings of Alicent.
Mm-hmm. I think we need to seek out a fantasy fan, a House of the Dragon fan, somebody who is an academic and who studies and understands feminism at that sort of academic level.
People. Yeah,
and you should interview them and have a discussion about that.
Okay.
About House of the Dragon season 2 from a feminist perspective.
Because what's more feminist than Game of Thrones?
That's right. Well, this is House of the Dragon, though, not Game of Thrones. So,
I mean, what's the intro title, right? Doesn't it say Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon when you look at the title card?
Does it?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
In the show art.
I don't think I've noticed.
Yeah.
Anyway. I think that would be an interesting conversation.
All right. DJ Miwa.
Alicent's offer to Rhaenyra was so painfully short-sighted. Rhaenyra rightfully called her out on the fact that she just wanted to get out clean. She did. She was trying to get out with a minimal amount of skin scraped off. I thought the ending montage perfectly showed that whatever offer Alicent made, there are too many things in motion for anyone to get out cleanly. Even if Rhaenyra shows up at King's Landing as planned, Aegon is in the wind. Alicent will simply have to wrestle with the events she has set in motion. I agree with this take.
Yeah.
You know, as I was saying before, the clockwork is all wound up and there's no way to stop what's happening now. Mm-hmm. And you can try to duck and avoid, but then I think Rhaenyra does the right thing and pins her to it and just says, no, there is a cost for this now.
Right. There's no mulligan here.
And it sucks that we were childhood friends and we're in now and our trajectories have landed us in this point. But I am the queen and I am trying to stop I'm trying to get through this with the least amount of bloodshed. There's going to be bloodshed. How much depends on how quickly we can end this thing. But It's going to require blood to be spilled.
Right. Alicent wants to go in here and say, may I just say, my bad.
Huge tiny mistake.
I made a huge tiny mistake. That's my favorite. That's my favorite comedy show of all time.
Yeah. Thanks, DJ Miwa. Good to hear from you.
Kat J says, I'd like to push back a little bit about your assertion that it was completely out of character for Alicent to agree to Rhaenyra killing Aegon. I think we can assume that Alicent has not seen the steps to recovery that Aegon has made, as this has been kept secret by Larys and the Maester.
Mm-hmm.
Alicent may have convinced herself that Aegon has no quality of life and that a quick, clean death would be preferable to him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing I'll say is, here's a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Aegon has no living son. He also has lost the ability to reproduce.
Correct.
Therefore, the next heir is Aemond in this regime. You cannot go with the girl because then you undermine his whole claim.
The whole point in the beginning with. Yeah. Very good point. And that's why Larys, I think that adds even more to what Larys was saying, is like, you're a dead man unless you get out of here.
Right.
Because you don't have any legitimacy anymore. It burst like a sausage. Your legitimacy burst like a sausage.
My God.
I know. It's terrifying. And I think that this idea of Aegon's quality of life, my God, this guy has survived falling from how big a height, burned, armor fused to his skin with the medical technology and the tools and medicine that they have at that time. That is an incredible constitution. Like, he really made his savings throw for burn.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Ugh. Maybe should have trashed that character. Reroll, baby.
Yeah.
Zero Ducks. Shall you read it?
I always take blue on Alicent as a symbol of her youth or innocence. In the scene with the light blue and the silvery purple on Rhaenyra, it really stood out to me. There's an accord and a softening between them in this conversation. I think the clothes are purposely colored and styled that way to emphasize it. Also, Rhaenyra has been wearing more military-style garb of late, but in her night clothes, she is able to be vulnerable. Brilliant costuming.
I like that. Especially the Alicent stuff. I think that they did a really good job bringing back the blue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is where the show is operating on that next level because they do have some budget and they do have excellent people who really want to be working on the show. And so they can bring in those secondary and tertiary levels of storytelling that really do make it that elevate the storytelling overall and gives us as podcasters and fandom more to dig into, right?
Right.
It makes it more fun to watch.
Right. Maureen D closes out the section, says the circumstances for the Rhaenyra Alicent meeting seemed unbelievable and poorly written to me. I get it as a poetic bookend to their previous meeting, but this meeting made less sense. How could Alicent just walk into the castle when they are at war just because her guard laid down his arms and not be restrained, especially after an attempt on Rhaenyra's life? And even in the scene earlier, Rhaenyra was disguised. There were several guards around, and the son for a son reference at this stage, after everything that has happened, felt like an artificial callback. I was thinking, which sons now? Jace for Aegon on the throne? Yeah. I think they're saying. I think she's saying, well, my son Luke died, so you have to get rid of Aegon.
Right, which is an unfortunate way to create the equation there because it's really, I'm the queen. You're finally recognizing that I am the rightful heir, that this whole thing was a big mess. And
big
now
daisies.
Yeah, oopsie daisies. And now your sons are prosecuting an unjust rebellion. And so off with their heads is what it has to be. But unfortunately, because of the history of these two women, that it then gets put into this equation of son for son, which sucks for them, right? As these two people that have such a deep and intimate connection.
Yeah, I think that was the line that rubbed me the wrong way. Was the son for a son thing really felt very like capricious. And I think if she would have said something like, I can't have the pretender be alive and rule peacefully, I think that's something that would have felt more natural.
All right, our next section, Gurm Geography. Belissa sends in an email. Hey, Lorehounds.
Belissa. I think she wrote in specifically saying how to pronounce it. So that's why
thank you. Thanks for the correction and the update. Belissa. Hey, Belissa. Hi, Lorehounds. I've got lots and lots of thoughts after watching season 2, episode 8, but I'll concentrate on a couple of geographic topics. But I want to preface that by saying that I'm pretty familiar with the map of Westeros and Essos. Excellent. We need a geography maester. Larys said that he was going to take Aegon to Essos, but they're in a wagon on land, not on a boat, so where are they heading? King's Landing was in the background, but they didn't seem to be heading towards any place that would have boats. And they were in with a bunch of cages with livestock or chickens, ? Certainly those weren't being shipped overseas, ? That's a good point, because any food stuff should not be leaving King's Landing, right? I don't think the hungry people of King's Landing would appreciate that.
Right.
They continue, I was very confused about where Tyland was meeting with the Triarchy folks. I did a bit of research, and it seems that the Triarchy is an allowance of the 3 free cities in Essos, but that after the war in season 1, they allied with the folks in Dorne. Is that right? So are they meeting in Dorne somewhere, or are they in Essos? Either way, I can't see how they could set sail to reach the Gullet on the morrow. What do you think? John, thoughts?
I believe they are in Essos there, because Dorne doesn't look very... I don't think that's Dorne.
Okay. Even though Dorne is a drier climate.
Yeah. Take to cross the narrow sea. Let's just look it up. Let's see if this is something that... let's see. A nonstop... Oh, it's flight. It's flight, somebody say. Sail across the narrow sea.
What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Sorry.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm looking at a map here. Lys, Tyrosh, and Myr, the disputed lands.
Yeah, so those are all in Essos.
That's really close. I mean, the stepstones are the bridge to Dorne, right?
Right.
It's the narrow sea, right? It's pretty narrow. So
if you're looking at what George is trying to do here, essentially Westeros is England and Essos is
continent.
Europe.
Right.
Yeah, so it is pretty close.
Yeah. All right, continuing. I guess a trip on Dragonback from Dragonstone to Harrenhal and back is just a quick ride, huh? It's not that far. It's actually pretty quick. Yeah, I would say just by looking at one of the maps that I'm looking at. But it was a very jetpacky episode in that regard. So I don't disagree.
Yeah.
Continuing, I was frustrated by Rhaenyra's scenes that started in episode 7, wondering why they couldn't have just shown that all at once. The only thing I can conclude is that to show how much time passed, Rhaenyra definitely missed the boat carrying her little brothers to Pentos. Rhaena definitely missed the boat carrying her little brothers to Pentos. I assume, darn. I was hoping she'd find the dragon and then go to Pentos and find Leonor. But how long that would it take for a boat to travel from Dragonstone to Pentos? I'm interested in your thoughts and clarification on any of these points. Thanks for all your hard work. I'm really enjoying the Lorehounds content, and I'm planning to sign up for the Rings of Power Season Pass also. Lissa, thank you so very much. I think we have to think that the narrow sea is much narrower than we might think. I think you're right. I think it's a really good thought. Think of the English Channel between England and the continent.
Yeah, and also, I don't think Laenor's alive. And this is not a Wafo thing. This is just, I think in the show they have telegraphed that he probably died because Sea Smoke was available.
Okay.
We don't know of any dragons having 2 riders at a time.
Right, based on what the show has told us so far. Yeah,
and Sea Smoke did not take a second rider until recently, when Sea Smoke suddenly became restless.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I think where they were meeting with the Triarchy, like they really established that it was there's different flora and fauna there, the palm trees, the CGI monkey, or whether it was real or not.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Corlys would have noticed if they crossed the Narrow Sea before this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even for him to get across the Narrow Sea, that was a trick, though, to run the blockade. And how did he get there? I think that's more of a question is, where did he get out from? He didn't come out of Blackwater Bay. So did he go out and around somewhere to Storm's End, to Shipbreakers Bay or something like that?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a question.
I remember there being a way to do it from a port in the north too.
Okay.
I can't recall exactly.
Got it. Do you want to talk about the Triarchy and Chris M's email?
Yeah. Chris M says, so Sharako Lohar is a merger of 2 captains in the book, one of whom is coded as trans or genderqueer. I think casting Abigail Thorne, as well as giving us book canon blue hair sellswords, was an inspired nod that they're moving closer to the book than audiences might expect. I like it.
Okay.
Women are from Venus and men are from Mars is the next section that Nancy
that is the next
for
section.
us.
All right.
And Karen V.
All right, Karen V is up. Rewatching, I've noticed a through line that is interesting. Multiple male characters have revelatory moments in which they peel off the veil of naivete and come to a more clear understanding of the war, their standing, and human nature. By contrast, female characters display innate understanding of these things and serve as emissaries and teachers. This is an ancient theme that can be traced all the way back to the character of Shamat in the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Sumeria. I have Gilgamesh on my shelf, and I read it in college, and I really was moved by it. I might have to take it down and skim through it again, because it's a really...
You might have to mesh your gills.
It's an tale. It's a tale of Erdum or something. I don't know what I'm going with that. Anyway, moving on. This episode was a shit show in many ways, but a bright light is that it again reinforces the theme that women are smarter, braver, wiser than men in this universe, if only they were listened to. For example, Jace, still reeling from the power shift and insecurity in his place, seems to finally grasp his advantage when Bela scoffs at his ignorance. Crispy. Finally figuring out that he's made a terrible mistake and none of it matters at all, waxes philosophical. Granted, he comes to this alone, but Alicent is on his mind, boob cloth as evidence.
He's a little sniffy.
Damon, Alice Rivers, and Helena as his guides to help him, effing finally, internalizes his role in the story and bends the knee to his wife, who was wise after all in waiting for him to wake up from his daydreams. Aemond, arrogant, scheming, chastened by Helena's refusal to fight and her knowledge of his burning of Aegon. It wouldn't change anything. The women in this world are made of iron and meant to sit the Iron Throne. Helena is the best character in the whole show, hands down. Nice email, Karen. I love it.
I like it. It. Thank you, Karen, for highlighting at least some of the good stuff this show is doing. And I do think this show is tapping into some truths about patriarchal norms and how they affect women. I think that is resonating.
Even centering the story on the relationship of Alicent and Rhaenyra, as we talked about before, that is a big change. And I wonder if we ran a Bechdel test on their conversations, how much of it would come out. I don't know what the scale. I forget what the scale is on that, but the idea that these two. But a lot of their arguments do come around back to men, so I have to think about that a little bit more. But anyway, centering the relation, the whole pinwheel of this story. It resolves around two women, not around two men.
Right. Team Alliances is next with Christina J saying, "Hi, Nancy. You've been amazing at arranging the feedback. I love how you keep the topics aligned. Very nice and unique touch. A couple of weeks ago, I think I may have been classified as a green. Made me laugh as I am vehemently against picking a side since there has never been a debate over who usurped the throne. His name is Otto Hightower. And it was decades in the making. There is no leg to stand on with the Greens. Rhaenyra is the rightful queen. I feel the Team Alliance question should have been proposed after season 3. There would be a more balanced attempt at a choice between the sides. Now that blank. Waffo. Thank you, Christina. Don't worry, we won't label you a green.
Yeah, I think the whole marketing was pretty silly, right? And that's, the marketing department is a separate department, right? It's not the job of the writers to do that. So just like headline writers are a different unit than the people who write articles and for journalism. So
yeah. I think I see what's happening here is that Nancy has arranged things into topics where she writes Team Green / Alicent. That doesn't necessarily mean you are Team Green. Right. That means that we are talking about a character on Team Green. Right. So Christina, I'll just continue because this is the same person. Okay. Christina continued on the topic of Alicent. My favorite part of the finale was Alicent going to Rhaenyra, not as an opponent, as she never saw her as one, but as a friend upon her journey of self-reflection. Notice this happens when Otto is no longer poisoning her ear with duty.
Good point. Really good point. That control is off. And yeah.
She is able to breathe and has come to terms with her flawed choices.
Her own flawed choices.
I'm glad she pointed out Viserys held Rhaenyra's claim out of guilt because he emotionally ignored his own children with Alicent, particularly Aegon, whom, in my opinion, he resented as he was what cost him his Aemma, a son. I see what you're saying. Like the pursuit of a son cost him Aemma. I wondered when Alicent's nail-biting would re-enter the storyline, and to see it as she dons blue again, rediscovering the girl/woman she is, versus the armor she cloaked herself in, was chef's kiss. Her growth and the red sewing were my favorite bits in the season.
Nice. Yeah, that was another nice little detail was the thumb-biting thing, which brought it back to their childhood relationship.
Right. Want to take Kat?
Kat says, in your discussion about the conversation between Alicent and Rhaenyra, you mentioned that there was not an explanation as to why Alicent decided to come back from her little retreat in the woods, and that her change of heart seemed to be out of character. When she was lying in the pool, there was a bird flying overhead, and Alicent appeared to be watching this bird fly, and that seemed to be the catalyst for her jumping into action. I wonder if there's a link between that bird and Helena, as it seemed that she came back to try and protect Helena and convince her to leave King's Landing. It could be just that the bird reminded her of Helena and that it represented the idea of freedom, or there could be more to it. We saw Alice Rivers and her connection to the barn owl, and now we know that there's possibility of something going on between Helena and Alice. It did make me wonder about the possibility of Helena warging. This could also be how Helena saw Aemond burn Aegon.
Right.
So, just really quickly before we talk about the Helena being plugged into the internet, the weird tree with her modem, is that whatever triggered Alicent when she was floating, for me, there was just some slightly more causal, element that was visible. Like I feel like I'm grasping to make up some kind of headcanon to explain it, and I totally am on board with your thought here, Kat J, about what was it triggered. It just wasn't fully apparent for me, and so that was, I think, my point of like why. I just needed a wee bit more.
Fair enough.
What do you think about the Helena being tapped in?
I don't think she's a warg.
Okay.
But I'm not, I wouldn't be like mad if it happened, but I don't think she's a warg at this point.
So they're really playing it like, it's kind of like the world between worlds here from the Star Wars universe of like, because she didn't warg, she was just there. She can just see, right? So I don't know how that works for her in this universe, because we haven't seen that kind of level of seeing before, unless you're actually in the tree. Is that right? Am I remembering those details right?
Well, Bran does eventually get the ability to just join scenes from his chair. Like he does not need to be in the tree by the end. Remember, he sits next to the fire and he's like, "Oh, now I have to go see John be born." And his eyes retract and
right. Okay, so interesting. Well, we'll see where they go with it in season 3.
Right. On Aemond, we have Chris M saying, "I think we might be suffering here from the fact that the actor, though brilliant, looks way older than the character is, so we're expecting more logical reactions. He's supposed to be a bookish, know-it-all 17 or 18-year-old with little real-world experience. I think this really comes across in his disconnect from how people actually respond to his actions and his disregard of the women and small folk in his life, who aren't really represented in the histories and such he reads."
Good point.
Okay. Fair enough.
I take it.
And then Kat also says, "I have a query I'd like your thoughts on. I wonder why Aemon and Vhagar didn't go and try to destroy the blockade. This was suggested in the first episode of the season when Aegon sat the Iron Throne. He stated that he was going to send Vhagar to deal with the blockade, so I'm wondering why that didn't happen. Thanks for your excellent coverage this season. I really enjoyed it, but I do wish we'd had 10 episodes. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So say we all. I would just say 2 things. Vhagar is supposed to stay near King's Landing. All the places we've seen Vhagar attack so far have been near King's Landing. It's only now that he's going to the Riverlands.
Right.
The second thing is, you would think that Corlys is prepared with some scorpions, right?
And I would say that if you move Vhagar out of pocket, then King's Landing is vulnerable to dragon attack by, even if they're smaller dragons. So the deterrent, I think they said this in one of the council meetings, that Vhagar is the deterrent to protect King's Landing.
Right. That's why people aren't attacking King's Landing. But now that you have this many dragons, like, you're going to leave that undefended? I guess he is now.
Yeah, which they're making a risk. They're making a calculated risk, I guess.
All right, I'm going to close out this section, then I'll pass it to you for the next 2.
Okay.
Alicia, our fellow Lorehound, says, "I've been complaining about this throughout the back half of the season. I don't find Aemon a fun villain anymore. He used to be interesting to me, but now the way he's written is one of my biggest gripes of the season, much more than Harrenhal."
I think you guys can talk about it on your Lorecast.
Yeah. We'll save that for the pod.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right,
you want to take Aegon?
Yeah. Marilyn says, "Aegon alive, however crippled, will always be a focal point for rebellion. Alicent may believe Aegon is so compromised And his life's so horrible at this point that she sounds like somebody who really knows what's going on in the show, even though she's not watching it. I have to
know.
say.
Well, it's almost as if she has a visual guide.
Is she plugged into the were trees? That he might be as well dead. It might be that it might also be that he would be preferable to her than to live with on a daily visual reminder of her role in what happened to her son. Yes, I never did like sausages very much. Now I really don't like them.
Fair enough. You want to keep going with Helena?
Yes. Chris M says, I think Eamon's crying because he's desperate at this point, and Helena is his last real hope to meet the Blacks with some kind of dragon parody. Just told him he's going to die. Regarding how Helena says Aegon sits a wooden throne, a wheelchair? Question mark. A la Bran's wooden wheelchair in Game of Thrones? Question mark.
It's a good guess.
Okay.
It's a good guess, I think.
Interesting.
That's not a WAFO thing. I think that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like this idea that I like this reminder from the previous email and this here. Aemon's a teenager and he's under tremendous amounts of pressure and he has committed tremendous war crimes.
Yeah.
And we know that somewhere inside of him there's a little bit of good yet that could come out. Do it.
Maybe.
That's what his ego said to him when he was burning the sharp point. Do it.
Oh boy, the dark side is strong with this one.
All right. Athena A. So Helena's prophecy. The wooden throne is Helena referring to, say, the driftwood throne as a temporary base of power for Aegon, or something like a wheelchair since he can't walk well? Just curious for other people who haven't read the books. Honestly, with the time it will take for this to come out, I may end up reading Fire and Blood because how will I ever avoid spoilers?
You know what I've discovered? If you're not looking for spoilers, it's kind of like you won't notice them. You might see them, but you won't notice them. But
just use our show guide. You won't get spoiled.
Yeah, you won't be spoiled.
Right.
Just never go on Twitter for the next 2 years.
You want to pick up with Laris?
Yeah, let's go to Laris. Chris M says, I'm struggling here. Does Laris actually have any qualifications to be Master of Whispers? Because Aegon giving him the title is thanks for some pretty obvious insight. Unlike Mysaria, he doesn't really do any subterfuge. He just pays a little more attention than anyone else. Burning his family alive isn't Master of Whispers' work. That's his main claim to villainy. I guess he also finds out that Mysaria, the real Mistress of Whispers, has plans in Alicent's retinue, who he subs out for his own. It feels very similar to Kristen bumbling his way into Lord Commander and Hand catching a Team Green trend. You fail upwards into incompetence in this administration.
It seems like it. Although I will say they established Laris with his sort of little criminal network in season 1, and then have just basically, they haven't done any more to bolster that, and they're just making us assume, like, I think we just have to shorthand it on our own to say that, oh, he's a master. But I agree that they have not shown much of his, like they made a big deal of him swapping out her Alicent's retainer, but then they never did anything with it.
Maybe it'll come up later. You know, I'm willing to give them a pass on that.
Right.
I'm just going to finish up Kristen Cole here, and then I'll pass it to you for Damon. Marilyn, our favorite Tolkien scholar, says, it seems to me that Kristen Cole is taking himself and even more his misdeeds and wickedness way too seriously. Put him next to Damon and then try not to laugh too hard at Kristen. I don't know. They both have done pretty atrocious things. I mean, Damon has straight up murdered people, as has Kristen, right? Kristen straight up murders Joffrey Lonmouth at a wedding. He
murders a dude at the small council meeting.
Out of rage and a lack of control over his own actions, and
sets the twins to fight.
He does set the twins to fight, and then he really helped start this war. Like, he is instrumental in starting this war. I think you could put a lot of the blame for the Dance of Dragons on him.
It was his plan to, with Aemond, to what was the name
Rook's
of that cast? Rook's Rest. Thank you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it's not a competition. They could both be evil. That's fine.
I think we need to clip. Can you do? Maybe you could do that. You could make Marilyn a clip of Kristen Cole doing his final thesis for his Philosophy 101 course, and just have that so that she can just watch that, because that is a pretty epic scene. So, all right.
Abby just asked me what's the cutoff for book spoiler feedback, and I said 10 hours.
All right, let's pick up with Damon. Christina J. Some lingering questions for us. How do you think Damon, who calls noblemen to have his fate in their hands, boy, is going to respond to the dragon seeds, Ulf in particular? Had not thought about that. That's a really good point, Christina. That's going to be interesting. He's not going to, Ulf is not, he's going to be on a very short leash with Damon.
Yeah, I think so.
Damon saw Helene in his vision. If when Riri takes King's Landing, how do you think that may influence his interaction with Helena within proximity?
Depends if he goes with her to King's Landing, right? He might stay in the Riverlands.
Mm-hmm. Being king of the Riverlands.
Well, I just mean, look, we got 2 more seasons, right? Let's say she takes King's Landing next episode, which I'm not confirming or denying. I don't actually know how they're going to do this.
Right, you're just being,
is he going to really be able to abandon their other lands yet, or is he going to have to like hold this whole area?
But at some point, there's a good chance that at some point they're going to cross paths.
Sure.
In general. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will he tell Rhaenyra she's a witch and try to utilize her or neutralize her? I think he's pro-witch now. I think he's been sensitized. I think Alice is got him sorted out. We all saw Damon.
She brings booze.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. We all saw Damon suck at the hard stuff. How do you imagine he will interact with a council that will have just as much influence, example Mysaria, as his own when it comes to Rhaenyra's decisions? I think he's going to be more. I think he's going to be more. He's more well heeled now. He's going to be more well heeled now, and he will be more operating as a hand would operate than will be a spoiler as he's been in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he seems pretty loyal at this point.
Yeah. And as long as he doesn't get in, he's great when it's with the up and up fighting stuff and men-at-arms and armies. And I mean, he performed the gold cloaks and all that stuff. So keep him there. And I think he'll be fine on that, focused on that kind of stuff.
Right.
But yeah, no, but when Damon eventually crosses paths with Mysaria, there's going to have to be a reckoning, because up until the moment he took the knee, Mysaria and Rhaenyra had a sort of a common point of view as Damon being this difficult X Factor thing, and they both have history with him. Now, Rhaenyra's experienced Damon taking the knee and the authenticity of that, but Mysaria hasn't. So Mysaria and Damon are going to have their own reckoning at some point. Okay. That's going to be interesting.
And not to mention, there's been a kiss between Mysaria and Damon's wife.
Very good point. Right? Very good point. Okay, well, this show could veer off into very strange territories. Continuing her email, I almost thought to myself, girl, it's better not to have him, because look at what he hath wrought already. He's bloodied your hands with more war crimes than she herself can concoct. As advocate, Team Blacks, are you not worried? Thanks for the great coverage.
He's not great for PR. That's correct.
What's that?
He's not great for PR. That's for sure. Yeah.
Everybody's just like, oh, it's Damon. Is that a show? Everybody loves Damon.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
You want to pick up with Jacaerys?
Yeah. Jacaerys, whatever it is.
Jace.
Chris says, Jace/Bela, even though Jace was incredibly classist, as is Rhaenyra, even though I lean Team Black, I don't know where this whole Rhaenyra is for the people slant has come from. His point remains super valid. I'm just going to say on the Rhaenyra is for the people slant, I don't think that is a thing. I think that Mysaria is pushing her to be for the people.
Right.
I think she just has an advisor near her, making her do the right thing here.
Well, she has been trying to avoid. I mean, that was the whole point of her going to King's Landing to meet with Alicent was to try to avoid war. She's been trying to avoid war. Now, whether it's just because she wants to avoid war or she's doing it for the small folk.
Or is she doing it because the small folk are going to be in the armies, but who are the armies going to be led by?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in fact, the armies are mostly going to be made up of minor lords.
Right.
And their families.
And she doesn't have an army until Daemon actually pulls the Riverlands together.
Right.
So.
All right. And then Chris continues, but Bela reading him the riot act was maybe my favorite moment for her. It's interesting that she is way more worldly than he is. Clearly fostering at high tide was good for her. She's far more even-headed than Jace or Rhaena, who both grew up at Dragonstone. Agreed.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yeah, Bela's is solid. And it goes back to that previous email about how the women in the show are a lot smarter.
Right. We're getting to Rhaenyra now.
I can see the bottom of the document, John.
I know. This is very exciting. I'm just going to continue quick. Christina says, with Aegon gone, there would be no reason for Rhaenyra to hold up her end of any deal to let Alicent and Helaena free. Will Alicent find herself prisoner, or will common sense prevail that clearly other forces operate on King's Landing? Is it common sense when Alicent has already gone behind your back to crown him? Right? And I think here's the thing. It is entirely believable that Alicent would have sent him away before Rhaenyra got there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that Rhaenyra, who has not had a good relationship with her for 10, 15 years, is just going to take her at her words like, yeah, he just happened to be gone when I got back, no big deal. Sorry, oopsies, me and Helaena are going to go now. So I think this is going to be a very interesting situation.
And it plays into the continued history that these two have had since their childhood, that they just, no matter what circumstance, all these circumstances, they just end up hurting each other and disbelieving each other. And these little things happen that are sometimes part of their control and sometimes out of their control. And they just keeps eroding the trust that they have with each other.
Right. And then we have Chris M saying, I think the Rhaenyra Mysaria kiss is an issue because it didn't pay off this season, but it's already had consequences. You notice at Harrenhal, after Rhaenyra and Daemon make up, he tries to do his little lovers in sync head bump, but she turns away.
Ooh, good catch.
They're pretty irreparably broken because Rhaenyra has moved on with Mysaria's help, I think. I actually disagree with this.
Okay.
I think what it was our chemistry is alive again, but we are in front of a bunch of minor lords and forces, and we have to keep this in a private area. They've never done that, as far as I can remember, in front of anybody else.
Okay.
This is a very conservative society, right? They have to do this behind closed doors.
And she was pretty clear, like, yeah, I think she was excited. I think there was a glimmer of excitement in her face.
Yeah.
And she said, don't leave me again. So
she could be attracted to more than one person, Yeah,
absolutely. And
so I'm going to disagree with Chris.
Their attraction has gone deep, but I will agree that with Chris in that it's going to be complicated. Right? Status. Yeah. It's complicated.
It's going to be like Avril Lavigne all over again.
Dragon Seeds layer cake. I'm sorry, I had to stumble on that one. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Cake. Layer cake confirmed. That is the pronunciation of the name.
It is correct. And I just stumbled. So on the one hand, I get the feeling that Ulf is going to be a problem. This is not exactly Helaena level clairvoyance by me. Fair enough. The show made it pretty obvious between his feet being on the fancy table and his manners around Rhaenyra. He's going to love having a dragon so much, maybe in the way where he just wakes up one day and says, I don't have to listen to these people anymore. I can just go do cool dragon stuff. This is the problem with this is the problem with making a goof a god. On the other hand, I do kind of love the idea of Wolf upending the entire system of the monarchy by becoming a flying pirate who answers to no one. I also love the idea of Hugh getting fed up and crushing Ulf's head in his hand like an empty red solo cup. Lots of ways this can end well for me. Indeed, layer cake. Indeed.
I have to remain silent on all of this.
Okay.
You're just positing all these things that I can't confirm and deny any of them.
We love a good podcast or we love a good show where we can speculate at this level.
Waffle away.
Closing arguments. I'll read Marilyn here, and then you want to close up with Nate.
Sure.
The closing arguments. Techno Thunderdome. Marilyn says, on the topic of the rate of change of technology in medieval Europe, medieval England from the years 1000 to 1500, there certainly was a vast amount. Much depends, I suppose, on what sorts of technology is looking at. Military, architectural, agricultural, artistic. One example, gunpowder. It came in the late 1400s, so it was not as well developed as it was in later years, but it resulted in a change in architecture as well as warfare. Spectacles, water clocks, printing, all of these things were introduced in England or Europe during those 500 years. The same could be said for medicine, art, clothing, pretty much all areas of cultural history. Major medical developments occurred when texts from Greek, Jewish, and Arabic authors made their way into Western Europe, were translated, and their ideas integrated into pre-existing systems. Human beings are constantly inventing and changing. The only thing that may alter is the rate of change.
Yeah. So Marilyn wrote in with that, affirming what we were saying about, technology does move in medieval England, and why does it move in Westeros? Nate came in to say, no, we're all wrong. And I there was a nuanced conversation. I don't want to be so reductive, but essentially, like some technology moves, some doesn't. It was a lot slower during that 500-year period, known at one point as the Dark Ages or the Medieval Ages. I think the whole point is the collapse of the Roman Empire. You know what? I'm just going to read Nate's email. How about that?
Why don't you do that?
House of the Dragon begins in 101 after Conquest. Game of Thrones begin in 298 AC, so there's a 197-year difference between the beginning of each series. If you pick any 200-year span between the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD up to 1095, the year of the First Crusade, an over 600-year span, could you identify any significant technological changes? I would argue not. Westeros isn't Rome at its height, so politically/organizationally, it's going to be way less together, rather. Pick any point along that line, and you're not going to see much technological difference, even in military technology, which David rightly points out is one of the first things to develop due to the stakes of falling behind. Surely, technology did advance during that time in some ways, but it wouldn't be apparent necessarily. Likewise, technology regressed somewhat dramatically after the fall of Rome. While the Dark Ages is no longer accepted to describe this period in the academic community, certainly early medieval European society lost capabilities and knowledge that the Romans had, while those skills and knowledge were being preserved in Byzantium and the Muslim states. 200 years is the blink of an eye. The pace of change since the Industrial Revolution is insane by comparison, especially the later 20th century to now. So it seems like nothing has changed, but what would in that world? Especially when you already have flying tactical nukes, why advance things? Yeah. I think the one quibble I had with Nate's statement is that I don't think you can tie the lack of technological growth to the fall of a major empire in House of the Dragon. You do have an equivalent to the fall of Rome in the fall of Illyria, but that's completely disconnected from Westeros. In fact, the fall of Illyria brought the Valyrians to Westeros and actually helped technology move a little bit in Westeros, right? It brought culture over.
Weren't they even the Targaryens? Weren't even they sort of? I heard something today where like they weren't even the best of the best of.
Oh no, they were a weak house in Valyria,
right?
And then Valyrians were not even dragon lords, as Corlys says. I think in the 7th episode.
So the one thing I'm kind of taking away between Marilyn's point and Nate's point is the delta of change, the rate at which change occurs. And if we look at the fall of Rome and the First Crusade, and then Marilyn is basically picking up from the First Crusade on, that we have the change. And I think during the Crusades, that was a time of like pulling the knowledge back up out of the, all of these distant places.
Yeah.
And the Romans, man, the Romans, their engineering was off the hook. Crazy stuff that they were doing in terms of moving water around and
Mhm.
road technologies. They were wild. Anyway, that's a separate story.
But then they did shit in a room together. So I don't know. I don't know if I want to live in Rome anymore.
And that actually makes me think all the more about Foundation, and then the whole premise of Foundation of trying to bank this knowledge so that once we get through after we unwind all of this violence and torment, that then there's information there that can be pulled up and useful again. Right. Same thing happened. That's a big part of the latter parts of Dune as well. Is how do you foreshorten these troubles, and then how do you pick up the pieces so that you can get back to where you were faster than if you had a similar trajectory without having that knowledge banked. Right. So
okay, all right. Yeah, no, Nate made a lot of really good points. I poke fun, but Nate really has the historian stuff down, and I'm just this lowly podcaster pontificating on my layperson knowledge.
Well, John, we've come to the end of our final House of the Dragon feedback. Nancy, again, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone in the community for such a lively and vigorous conversation and discussion. It really makes the show a lot more fun when we get to work through these things. John, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for all your work on House of the Dragon show guide. The one guide to rule them all is ready. The show pass is ready. The season pass is ready. We just don't have a lot of information yet on scheduling from Amazon.
No, we don't, because that's how Amazon goes. And we did ask for screeners. I hope we get them. Amazon, if you're listening, if you're trying to do like a vibe check, we love you. You're the best network ever, and everything is great.
Wasn't that the one-line email that we got back? Like, oh, we'll keep you posted. Or
that's usually what we get, though.
But this one was like not even signed by anybody.
I know. Hey, you know what? We love you, Amazon. We love your one-line emails. You give us those screeners, and everything will be all good.
We're just a bunch of bootlicks and lick splitters over here, or whatever.
The lick spittling begins.
Let's wrap it out. Thank you, everyone. You guys, you and Alicia are lore casting tomorrow morning.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And
that'll be out within a day or two of this being out.
Sounds good. What else do we have going on in the world of the Lorehounds?
Well, I never wrote a weekly schedule this week, but that's because it's just been crazy. But we just put out Deadpool and Wolverine, so that's coming out. I know you just did a trailer breakdown of Alien Romulus.
Yes, our joint project with every single sci-fi film ever. Aisha and I did a sort of little primer for Alien Romulus. And then yesterday we recorded an episode with two academics, Roger and Jason. That episode that's that on the joint project side. That one's more on Aisha's side, sort of following her format a little bit. And that's going to come out on the 18th. So just a couple days after Romulus comes out. And then we are recording. So we're doing a whole bunch of timey-wimey podcast stuff. But we're recording an episode with Alicia and Aisha and fingers crossed Ron on the 45th anniversary of Alien, the 1979 movie. And then for subscribers, I did a breakdown of the Alien Romulus trailer, and I did that actually like as a video breakdown.
Yeah, that was awesome.
See me. That was fun. I hope it came.
Check that out.
Trying to work with OBS and do all these things, and so yeah.
You got it. OBS is a nice free software.
It is very cool. And then what do we go from there? We're kind of hanging out till the end of the month, till we hit the 29th.
Well, next week I have a Silmarillion story dropping. I will be on vacation. And when I say vacation, I mean I'm going to be, doing family stuff really. Right. But I will be on vacation from potting next week, but I will be dropping a Silmarillion story. It's already scheduled within everything.
Yeah.
So enjoy that. That is with Aaron from Lore of the Rings.
I'm hopefully going to turn around the Alien thing too for next week as well. So we'll have a couple things in the week.
Yeah. And also, aren't you doing a preview for Rings of Power?
Yes, season 1.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Marilyn and I are doing a season 1 recap, and you were going to use the excellent recap that you wrote for the one guide to rule them all, and we're going to use that as our backbone. And we're going to keep that real tight, and just to make sure that, like, if you don't have time to do a full season 1 rewatch, you'll be able to listen to this pod and be caught up to speed, ready to start for season 2.
Well, I look forward to your tight 2-hour podcast.
That is short for when we get Marilyn on the podcast. That is.
I know. As soon as we were like, oh, it's going to be the 3 of us on the pod, I'm like, we got to start at like 5 p.m.
For reals.
All right. Well, how about some shout outs before we head out of here?
Do that.
This is nice.
Nice. I like this. I'm going to cruise around with a top down in my car at sunset.
Yeah.
Our Discord server boosters are Gnarls, Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dork the Ninjas, Duve71, Captain Gingy 56, Athena Aguilea, Adrienne, and Tina. Thank you for making our Discord a better place for our community. To our lore masters, Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, who is also our lore librarian. Our librarian? We have a blog. Well, we'll talk about it on another podcast. Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, DJ Miwa, Sarah M, Andra B, Huang Yu, Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dally V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Stuart B, Jeffrey B, Elisa U, and Adrian. Thank you all so very much for being top tier subscribers. Thank you for your ongoing support. It really means the world to us. Thank you to all of our subscribers. Thank you to all of our listeners. We had a great time this season. We hope you did as well. And we'll see you on the next pod. Thanks, John.
See you then. The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.